Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Boozer here. Thanks for stopping by. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Chimera, and I'm going to offer you guys 10 pieces of advice that I've learned from playing the Chimera for the last 2 weeks or so, a bit on the test server, and of course, we just finished our first live week, roughly, of the Chimera Clash. And obviously, having the Chimera being accessible to everybody in the game can lead to some new findings and all that stuff. So it's good to round it all up and offer you guys in a digestible format here. So that's what I'm going to try to do in this video. Some of the advice might be a little basic, might be something that you guys already know, but if not, I'm sure it's going to be helpful for some of you guys. So let's jump right into it. All right, so first things first, I want to show you guys the key that I put in this week for my Chimera Clash, and it's going to be this key right here. It's not much different than the team that I tested on the test server, and that was the video I made for you guys. But this team, it has a small bit of improvement to it while sacrificing a bit of survivability. So in this team, I took Necmo Thar instead of using Snick Tracks. So Snick Tracks offered ally protection and shields. But Necmo Thar gives you turn meter boost, and a turn meter boost is actually really important. So that's going to be the first tip I have for you guys. If you guys want a team that actually functions really well, having turn meter boost against the Chimera is actually a really strong ability. Basically, it gives your team more turns to do attacks, more turns to recover, more turns to cycle through your cleanses, your buffs, and even cycling through your debuffs. So having turn meter boost, it's really good. In this fight against the Chimera, taking more turns is definitely going to be one of those advantages that you will have against it. And there's no negative to taking too many turns unless you count cycling through your buffs too quickly. Right now, the meta champion is actually this dwarf, Senna Amberheart. So I did a showcase on Senna Amberheart when she was first introduced on the test server, and I thought she was really interesting. I did her I did her run in Hydra. I made a team around her in Hydra, mainly around like Podrig's continuous heal, and I was actually pretty impressed. I was pretty impressed, and I thought there is something here with this champion, and I just didn't have time to keep playtesting her, but I thought she was really fun. Her passive gives her some insane turn meter fill, especially against the Chimera here, and she has shown to be an early MVP for some of the highest damage dealing Chimera teams out there. So if you guys have her, make sure you guys give her a quick look. She's very good. She brings the increased speed continuous heal, which boosts her turn meter, and then she brings a revive as a backup. Her A1 is very strong at triggering the turn meter here with the speed in all battles as well. Super base speed as well. Great champion for the turn meter role. All right, guys. So the next tip I have for you guys is actually, in line with the turn meter, boosting champion, fast champion. You want increased speed. You want increased speed in your team, so you can have a quick look at all my increased speed champions. Well, actually, let's include the vault as well. But basically, you want increased speed on your Chimera team. It doesn't matter where it comes from as long as your team has it. Again, same idea. You want to be able to take as many turns as possible, cycle through your abilities, your debuffs, cycle through your buffs, get more of your big attacks back. Having increased speed, make sure you guys have it. Right now, the increased speed that I suggest for you guys that might be the strongest, most accessible one, most likely would be Lydia, because Lydia brings increased speed on a really good ability, obviously with the decreased defense and weaken together with the increased speed. She also brings the block active skills and have A1 fear. She's one of the MVPs for sure for most free-to-play players because she is free-to-play accessible. She's available to everybody in the game, and she's really good in this format. So make sure you guys bring increased speed. That's very important for your Chimera team so you can get some more turns. All right, guys, again, turn meter boost, increased speed. What's natural to come after? Decreased speed. So you want more turns against the Chimera boss, so you want decreased speed as well. Here are my decreased speed champions available to me on my main account. You can kind of see here, there's a couple options, but there's definitely less options here compared to increased speed. They're actually viable and good. So from my first 1 key team at 150 Ultra Nightmare damage, I use Necmo Thar for AoE decreased speed. You can use a single target decreased speed, and it works very okay as well. So some champions I'm seeing show up for that role. Ramantu, bringing the A2, basically 5 debuffs here with a decreased speed on a single target. You only need a single target decreased speed. Ramantu, I did highlight him in one of my preview videos as a potential MVP for this boss content, and so far he's shown to be extremely good. So Ramantu, obviously a late game free-to-play option. I did highlight somebody like Snicktrax in a previous video as well. He was on my original 1-key Ultra Nightmare team. Somebody like Mother Cybele could work too, because she does bring the A1 decreased speed here as well. I've seen the Owl get used for his for her decreased speed as well. If you have Lammasu could work. I find Lammasu a little bit hard to use because she doesn't bring full cleanse on the A3. She brings more damage here, but she doesn't bring like a team support. But she does bring the decreased speed here as well. In the same kind of conversation as Necmo, you could use Eostrid as well for a decreased speed, increased speed, turn meter boost role if you have her. I even looked into some options for epic. So you got Mausoleum Mage here, you got the A1 decreased speed, you got Ruella with decreased speed as well. Similar to like Ramantu's style, multi-hit, single target, decreased speed here as well. In a preview video, I highlighted Rogard having decreased speed here on the A3. You could even use Stagnite. So if you guys are hurting for decreased speed, Stagnite with the decreased speed on the A1, pretty good. 50% chance, 50% chance. You can bump that up with the Sniper Mastery, so you can bump that up a little bit. I even use High Katoon for decreased speed. So there's, you know, these are things that are going to give your team more turns, like I said, to recover, to do more damage, to cycle through, you know, any negative debuffs on yourself. And yeah, it's mandatory if you want to do well against the Chimera. Decrease speed, increase speed, turn meter boost. All right, so my fourth piece of advice for you guys is the protection set. You must have a protection set. I know people have been saying like the 9-piece is very hard to get, and frankly I wouldn't say the 9-piece is mandatory, but I will say the minimum would be 6-piece, because 6-piece gives you 50% chance of protecting some of your buffs, whereas the 9-piece gives you 75% chance. The damage from this is good, but it's not 100% necessary if you're using max HP champions. If you're not using max HP champions, then the damage boost from all the buffs definitely helps, like, you know, a normal damage dealer. But I would say 6-piece minimum. I think 6-piece is probably more accessible to people, of course. If you can swing a 6-piece, then it's definitely usable. But this is one of the most important sets you can bring to the Chimera boss. And this stems from basically doing your Hydra battles every week, getting your class chest, whatever, getting your accessories, your personal reward chest from Hydra. Make sure you guys get all of those free pieces of gear, and make sure you guys gear out your champions, your supports, your buffers in those protection sets. You don't need insane pieces, right? You don't need insane pieces. You don't need pieces that are like, you know, top tier. You don't need to be embarrassed about wearing them. This is actually a pretty good banner, I guess. But, you know, just make sure you have some decent pieces, right? Some decent pieces that actually work, have some speed on them. And then just put them on your supports, anybody that buffs, and then you'll be good to go. At least have a better time anyways. All right, guys. So my next piece of advice actually is a set suggestion that I don't have. And that's going to be the Slayer set. I don't have a workable Slayer set, and the big champion that needs Slayer to do max damage is actually Marius. Marius is a very, very good option to do the big damage here with the Slayer set. I don't have Slayer set myself. You can kind of see the options I have for the Slayer gear on Marius. Here's a defense-based, amulet, and then a bunch of... Actually, is this right? Yeah, defense-based amulet, and then some bad banners, and then my actual normal pieces of gear, my Slayer gear, is just non-existent. Basically, it's a really hard set for, you know, obviously to roll well with, because I have limited options for those because I don't buy the Forge Pass, right? But if you put a Slayer set on Marius, you're going to be doing almost double damage. So I'll show you guys this. So if you guys take a quick look here, this is Nub Raids, basically using the team that I put together with Skeletor as the decreased speed champion. So I use Snicktrax here in my preview video, and then in my actual run I use Necmothar, so for decreased speed. But basically the key here is the 2 enemy max HP damage dealers. So you can kind of take a look at here how Marius compares to Newt. 84 million versus 46 million, almost double what Newt does. And his Marius is in Slayer gear. And I'll quickly show you guys how much damage my Marius in normal lethal gear does against Newt. So Marius here does 83 million, but Newt does 60 million. So he's only doing 20 million more, whereas Nubs's Marius is doing 40 million more in basically the identical team. So if I had Slayer gear on my Marius, I would be probably expecting, 20, 25 maybe extra million damage from a comparable Slayer set on my Marius. So if you guys have Slayer gear, make sure you guys put it on your Marius. If you guys don't have Marius, Aetherion works really well. So Aetherion is the high health AoE max damage dealer here. He works really well here. Same kind of idea. Really high gear threshold needed for this guy to really rock damage, but he's really good as well just for that max HP multi-hit damage dealer. So Slayer gear works really well on him. Definitely a set to, basically put together just for this content. You definitely get some easy damage points there. All right, so my next pointer for you guys, number 6, is actually buff extenders. Having buff extenders on protected buffs is actually really, really nice. This gives you the ability to basically have more consistent runs. Obviously, having your buffs stolen or stripped off is really, really bad at the wrong times against the Chimera. So having buff extenders definitely have a lot of value against this boss. So for example, some of the top tier buff extenders currently used right now, I'll show you guys. Let's see, you can, if you guys didn't know, you can filter by like this. So buff extension, and then you go, see everything. So right now, some of the best buff extenders right now, obviously Lady Mikage. You're going to see Lady Mikage show up in a lot of teams. She's really, really good right now. Buff extending, obviously crit damage, buff as well. Ally attack for extra damage. Also brings a buff duration drop against your enemies. So that's really nice as well. And then of course her A1 throwing in a Shadowkin, whether it be Ninja, Harima, Toshiro, they all do really, really good damage. So Mikage is definitely top tier. Another big champion for the buff extender, obviously, that we've seen a lot of is Krisk. So Krisk proving his worth once again from Lizardman. Krisk was basically leaned on, still is leaned on super heavily in Hydra as well. He brings everything, right? Decreased speed, brings increased speed, ally protection, continuous heals, increased defense. He brings everything. So having one champion bring so much is just absolutely insane. And again, for super hard content, Krisk is the guy you want to have, and he extends buffs as well. So he's just a great champion for this role. Definitely don't underestimate it. So if you have it, it's very good to have. And like I said, it works really, really well with protected buffs. So if you guys are fortunate enough to actually have this champion, Alatreon. Alatreon's one of the better champions for this role as well. He brings the block debuffs, he brings shield, the increased defense, and an A1 increase duration here. So very, very strong champion as well. Very good for this boss, for example. Like, finally had the time to really, really shine. I mean, he shined in other areas like Amius and stuff too, but this guy really, really shines in this content. All right, my next piece of advice for you guys. If you guys don't have max HP damage dealers, traditional damage dealers can work. They're just going to do a lot less damage. So for example, somebody like Geomancer. Geomancer is going to do a lot of damage against this boss. And he's going to be one of the better options if you guys don't have max HP damage dealers or any kind of Shadowkin shenanigans. So champions like that I'm referring to are like, for example, Harima. So if you have somebody like Harima, she pairs really well with Mikage to do some extra damage. Her passive actually helps as well because the Chimera forms do ignore some defense. So having the passive from Harima basically cuts that effectiveness by a lot, so they deal less damage to you, which is really, really nice. A good option, free to play option, I mean, is Ninja. So if you have Ninja or you've been around for Ninja, Ninja actually does quite a bit of damage. Not this particular build, like this is not a great build or anything, but Ninja in particular, especially with Mikage, does quite a bit of damage. And his skill kit works really well against a single target boss, to be honest. So having this unloading on the boss really, really does a lot of damage. Other damage dealers such as like Taras, I've tested Taras here. Taras just straight damage. He's really strong. He does, buff extension as well, but he's not going to match up as well as max HP damage dealers, but he can hold his own quite a bit. I've also tested champions like Thor. So Thor is just mainly a damage dealer, but then he does bring additional benefits, right? He brings decreased speed, which is really, really interesting and really necessary sometimes if your roster is lacking. So Thor does a lot, and he does decent damage as well. Nothing insane. He doesn't match Geomancer in terms of damage, but he does decent damage. Another champion that is worth looking at is actually Varl. Varl, in the same way like Thor, does good damage. He also brings Weaken. So if you don't have a champion to bring Weaken, having him on your squad actually really helps your whole team do more damage. So these are just kind of examples of like traditional damage dealers that can kind of help you out if you don't have champions like Newt, don't have champions like Marius, Acrizia, obviously, like I said, Toshiro with Mikage, like those kind of combinations. These champions can still do some work for you, just obviously not as much as those mentioned champions. All right, guys, so we're going to hop into the Chimera Clash here. And the next tip I have for you guys is actually focusing on the amount of trials completed versus your total damage. So there are going to be some instances where you want to give up your total damage in order to do more trials, because the clash points coming from the run with more trials completed might actually be more. So there might be some consideration here. So I'll give you guys an example again with our friendly neighborhood content creator Nubkex. So Nubkex here doing 149 million with his Mikage Ninja team. You can see here he did 9 trials, which is actually a pretty good amount, because I think normally I can do about 4 or 5, and I think that's what most people are doing without really focusing too much on it. But he did 9, which is really, really good. And you can kind of see here I did a little bit more damage on top of him, but I only have a 4 multiplier. So you can kind of see here the damage difference in terms of total multiplied points here. So I'll show you guys in a second, but this is his team. Ninja obviously doing the super heavy lifting. So just keep in mind he did 9 trials. So we'll jump into our clan here, and you can kind of see what he did here in terms of his battle list here. So his Ultra Nightmare, he did 2.23 billion points, and then myself with basically the same point like damage output, I did 1.55 billion clash points only. So 700 million points less than Nubkex, because Nubkex did an extra 5 trials on top. So technically his team, our team basically did the same amount of damage, off by maybe like 1%. But because he did more trials, that was a big difference in terms of Chimera Clash points. So this is going to be something that we have to put more consideration into in the future to find more optimal teams. Of course, right now, week 1, we're trying, people are struggling just to get points on the table, just to clear this thing. But in the future, we're going to have to look for optimal teams, more optimal champions, so that we can clear more of the trials. The trials are stagnant. They won't change. So they're always going to be there. So they're going to be something that we can actually use as a guide in terms of how to build even more optimal teams in the future, but something to consider moving forward. All right, guys, tip number 9, auto versus manual. If you guys have noticed, doing this Chimera Clash or Chimera runs with auto is very, very difficult. You're up against RNG all the time. Our AI presets are not strong enough to deal with the different changing forms of the Chimera. So obviously, like if you have, for example, using Newt, and then you have the counterattack buff active versus the Viper is going to steal the counterattack when he transforms, and then he's just going to wreck your team. Or for example, if you have the Ram and you're firing off your big attacks into the Ram and all your guys just die, it's really, really tough doing it manual. You'll be resetting manual nonstop. So how about doing it manually? In terms of manual, it's actually, you're going to get the best outcome for it. In terms of points, because you can manual it. In terms of overall time spent, so for example, the run that I had, I spent about 40 minutes doing this manual run. If I did it full auto, I would probably lose maybe like 50 million damage. And then I would probably have to restart and do it auto again. Eventually, I'll probably get the 1 key, but it's just going to take a long time just to do it. So I would definitely recommend, depending on how much time you guys have, to consider doing it manually so that you guys can get a good outcome and then just cash it in and then be on your way doing your other things in life, right? Because you don't want to spend hours and hours autoing and then restarting and restarting these runs. So just a suggestion. I know it's not possible for everybody to manual this. And obviously learning how to play against each form is a bit difficult. But each form has a rotation, right? You get 5 turns against each form. They transform back into the ultimate form, 5 turns, and then back. And then you kind of get a feel for their skill ability. And then you actually get a feel for your own team's skill ability as well, relative to their ability. So the more you do it, the better practice you'll get. And of course, this is first week. But this is something that I've noticed that I would probably just do one good manual run instead of just trying to auto this every, and then clicking auto and then restarting. It's a little bit frustrating and a little bit more time consuming. So I think doing it manual might be better for some people. All right, guys. And the 10th piece of advice that I got for you guys is make sure you guys do your stat checks. Make sure you guys are aware and make sure you guys are up to speed on what difficulty you guys should be tackling. So I actually comprised all the data mine stats here from Hell Hades' website. Make sure you guys check that out. Of course, this is from his stage tool. So these are the actual stats for the Chimera labeled Ultra Nightmare, Nightmare, Brutal, Hard, Normal, Easy. Just, single page, easy to digest. But this is what we're looking at here. We're looking at 305 speed for the Ultra Nightmare Chimera boss. It's actually higher than what I thought. I thought it was about 275 in the test server, but it's 305 apparently. In terms of overall resistance, he has 400, so you need 425. My guess was about 400 in the test server, so 425 needed to land basically, I think 96% debuff land rate here. In terms of resistance needed to resist, I think over 90% resistance, 505 resistance. Resistance is a viable strategy, but having a 9-piece protection set might be easier for some people. Notice how insanely high the defense is. 8,000 defense, 6,500 defense. Ignore defense is going to be massive in this boss. I assume that they're going to be offering live arena bonuses for the Chimera in the near future. So, PSA, make sure you guys save your medals if you guys are struggling for Chimera so you guys can maximize your damage, of course. But ignore defense should be massive for this boss. So you can kind of see here, Ultra Nightmare stats. Nightmare stats, you got the bit of a drop here, 285 speed, 375 accuracy needed, and 455 resistance needed. So Nightmare Chimera is similar to Nightmare Hydra, but much faster. Nightmare Hydra, the fastest Hydra head, I believe, is the Head of Mischief, and he's only 250 speed. And the accuracy needed for that isn't even this high. So the Nightmare Chimera is even harder than Nightmare Hydra right now. And then you have Brutal Chimera, 245 speed with 275 accuracy needed, 355 resistance needed. So this might be okay, Brutal. I think most people maybe in the late game would be tackling Brutal or at least have enough stats. And then once you start getting pretty hardcore into the game, you would probably have stats for Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare. So don't be discouraged if you guys are seeing people like content creators or whatever tackle Ultra Nightmare on day one right away, right? Because these stats are generally not needed or obtainable in every other piece of PvE content to date. Okay, so these stats are definitely overkill. So Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare, Chimera, I think is going to be very, very difficult for a vast majority of people. So temper your expectations, guys, a little bit. Brutal, Hard is already quite strong. Keep in mind that, for example, Faction Wars, it's recommended to go like 200 speed, 200 accuracy. So if you're doing Faction Wars 2021, like you're doing normal Chimera stats, like 185, 175 accuracy. Like Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss is 190 speed, 230 accuracy. So Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss would be somewhere between hard and normal Chimera boss. So that's kind of like where your expectation should be. If you're doing Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss and you think you can do Ultra Nightmare Chimera with the same stats, then this is supposed to show you guys that that is not the case. Anyways, guys, hopefully this video gave you guys some information to digest a little bit. It's a quick 10 basic kind of rundown pieces of advice. I know this is kind of, redundant or basic for a lot of people, but I'm sure it's going to help some people figure things out a little bit better for the Chimera. Like I said, it's the first week. We're all trying to learn together and grow together and try to tackle this boss. 8 billion for the top chest seems absolutely ridiculous. This personal reward chest, 8 billion. But I'm pretty sure with relics and all that stuff, it's going to get a lot easier over time. So at least there's some runway here. But so far, the Chimera feels not too bad. And like for myself personally, not too bad. Obviously, it will be tough for newer players. This is endgame content, of course. Like I said, with the stats shown, very endgame content. But so far, not too bad. Other than the reflect damage from the RAM and the RNG involved, it's not too crazy because you can actually like pump up your own stats and then benefit from it by going fast. But anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for the video. Hopefully it was helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have some key tips that I missed in this video. How has the experience been for you guys fighting the Chimera in the first week? Let me know in the comments. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you guys for watching to the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video.